The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep hum that echoed through the enormous space. Ambassador Helen Carter walked through them with steady steps, her black uniform crisp and clean. Behind her, 5 other humans followed. In perfect formation, their faces showed no emotion as they made their way to the small section reserved for Earth's representatives. The chamber was huge, beyond imagination. It could hold 50,000 beings, and today it was nearly full. Creatures of every shape and size filled the curved rows that stretched up toward the domed ceiling. Some looked like giant insects with clicking mandibles. Others resembled walking trees with bark-like skin. Many had forms so strange that human minds struggled to understand them. At the center of the chamber stood the speaking circle, where a tall crystalline being waited. This was Vexthera, the current council leader. Her body was made of what looked like living diamond, and light danced through her transparent form with each movement. When she spoke, her voice rang out like musical notes. The council will now hear the final decision on Human Proposal 2847, Vexthera announced. The request for equal representation in council affairs. Helen Carter felt her heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. For 3 years, she had stood in this chamber arguing for humanity's right to have an equal voice. 3 years of polite rejection. 3 years of being told that humans were too young, too emotional, too inexperienced to understand galactic politics. During those same 3 years, human soldiers had died by the thousands fighting the void. Spawn. These creatures came from somewhere outside normal space, consuming entire star systems like cosmic locusts. They turned planets into gray dust and left nothing but emptiness behind. The war had been going on for 27 years now. When it started, the council races had fought bravely. The Zilani, proud warriors with forearms and silver skin, had charged into battle with ancient honor codes. The Korthok, being so old they remembered when stars were young, had used their vast knowledge to predict enemy movements. The Hesperians, numerous as ants and twice as organized, had thrown millions of soldiers at the enemy. They had all failed. The Void Spawn adapted to every strategy. They learned from every defeat. They grew stronger with each world they consumed. The Council forces were losing badly when humanity arrived on the scene. Humans brought something new to the war. They brought creativity. While other races followed ancient battle plans, humans invented new tactics every day. They built weapons. That changed form during combat. They created shields that bent reality itself. Most importantly, they never gave up in 3 years. Human forces had pushed the Void Spawn back further than the Council had managed in 24 years. Human medical technology had cut military death rates by 90%. Human logistics. Systems had solved supply problems that had crippled armies for decades, but none of that seemed to matter now. The Council has reviewed humanity's request thoroughly, Vexthera continued. Her diamond form sparkled as she moved. We acknowledge their contributions to our mutual defense efforts. However, representation in this body requires wisdom that comes only with age and experience. A low rumble of agreement came from the assembled delegates. Helen noticed that many of them would not meet her eyes. She had worked with these beings for years. She had shared meals with some of them, discussed philosophy with others. She had thought some of them were friends. Furthermore, Vexthera said, the Council has determined that certain adjustments must be made to territorial boundaries. The Zilani have expressed need for expansion to support their growing population. Helen's aide, Lieutenant Danny Brooks, shifted slightly beside her. She could sense his tension, but he kept his discipline. All the humans did. The territory is currently designated as Human Colonial Zone. 7 through 15 will be transferred to Zilani administration within 6 standard months, Vexthera announced. The human populations in these areas will be relocated to more suitable regions. The chamber erupted in approving sounds. Clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and stranger noises filled the air. Helen realized they were celebrating. They were happy to take away nearly half of human space. Zones 7 through 15 contained 47 human worlds. 15 million people called, Those planets home. They had farms there, cities, schools where human children learned about the stars. They had graves there, where human soldiers who died fighting the Council's war had been laid to rest. The vote will now be called, Vexthera said. All in favor of human proposal 2847 for equal representation. A single light appeared in the voting display. 1 vote out of 848 possible is Helen's vote. All opposed. The display lit up like a constellation. 847 points of light, each one a rejection. Helen counted them automatically, though she knew the number by heart. Every single non-human delegate had voted against her people. The proposal fails, Vexera announced with what might have been satisfaction. The territorial transfer is approved by the same margin. This concludes today's session. Helen Carter stood slowly. Around her, the other human delegates did the same. Now she gathered her data pad and her notes, placing them carefully in her briefcase. The chamber buzzed with conversation as delegates began to file out, but Helen took her time. She looked up at the viewing galleries where staff members and observers sat. In the human section, she saw faces she knew. Officers who had served with distinction. Scientists who had developed the technologies keeping Council forces alive. Engineers who had built the infrastructure that made modern galactic civilization possible. They all watched her with the same question in their eyes. What now? Helen closed her briefcase with a soft click. She turned to face the center of the chamber where Vexthera was speaking with other council leaders. Crystalline beings seemed to sense her gaze and looked over. Ambassador Carter, Vexthera called out. I trust you understand that this decision is in the best interests of galactic stability. Helen nodded once. I understand completely, she said. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. We understand exactly where we stand. She turned toward the exit, her delegation falling into step behind her. As they walked through the massive chamber, Helen felt thousands of alien eyes watching them. Some showed pity. Others showed satisfaction. A few showed something that might have been guilt. None of that mattered now. At the great doors, Helen paused and turned back one final time. The chamber stretched out before her, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Creatures who commanded fleets of ships, who ruled over trillions of citizens, who had shaped the course of galactic history for millions of years. Good luck with your war, she said quietly. The words were not loud, but somehow they reached every corner of the chamber. Conversation stopped. The delegates turned to stare. Even Vexthera's crystal form seemed to dim slightly. Helen Carter walked out of the Galactic Council chamber with her head high and her back straight. Her delegation followed in perfect order. The great doors closed behind them with a final, resonant boom in the corridor outside. Lieutenant Brooks finally spoke. Ma'am, what are your orders? Helen looked at him, then at the others. Good people, all of them. People who had believed in the dream of galactic cooperation. People who had sacrificed everything for beings who saw them as useful tools and nothing more. Send a message to Earth, she said. Tell them to begin Protocol 7 immediately. Protocol 7 was something they had hoped never to use. It was the complete withdrawal of all human personnel, technology, and resources from Council space. It had been developed years ago, when some human leaders worried that cooperation might turn into exploitation. They had been right to worry. As the human delegation made their way to their ship, word was already spreading through the station. Human technicians were shutting down systems. Human doctors were packing medical supplies. Human engineers were downloading their personal research and deleting shared files. The humans were leaving. Quietly and without fuss, they had been told. They were not wanted as equals, so they would not stay as servants. Captain Jake Murphy stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station and watched the stars through the massive viewport. Behind him, the sounds of organized chaos filled the corridors. Humans were everywhere, carrying boxes, rolling equipment, on hover carts, and carefully dismantling systems they had spent years building. Kepler Station was huge. It stretched for 20 kilometers in every direction, a city in space that housed 3 million beings. Most of them were not human, but the station could not function without human technology. Every major system, from life support to communications, had been designed and built by human engineers. Now, those same engineers were taking it all apart. "Captain Murphy, we have a problem," said Chief Engineer Sandra Wells as she approached him. Her coveralls were stained with oil, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had been working for 18 hours straight. "What kind of problem?" Jake asked. "The Zilani dock workers are asking questions. They want to know why we are removing the quantum processors from the cargo handling systems. Without those processors, the station can only handle about 10% of its normal shipping traffic." Jake nodded. Had expected this. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the processors belong to Earth Corporation, and we are taking them. For maintenance. But they are not stupid, Captain. They know something big is happening." Through the viewport, Jake could see human ships docked at the station's many arms. Cargo vessels, passenger transports, and even some military ships were being loaded with everything humans had brought to Council space. The operation was massive, but it was happening quietly and efficiently. "Any word from the Council authorities?" Jake asked. "They have been calling all morning," Sandra replied. "Station Commander Vexani wants to speak with you personally." "She sounds worried." Jake was not surprised. Vexani was a Korthok, one of the ancient beings who had run galactic affairs for millions of years. She was smart enough to understand what was happening, even if she did not want to believe it. "Tell her I will speak with her in 1 hour," Jake said. "By then, we should have the last of the medical equipment packed." Sandra nodded and walked away. Jake turned back to the viewport and watched more human ships arrive. The evacuation was ahead of schedule. His people were good at their jobs. Across the station, Dr. Lisa Bennett was having her own difficulties. She stood in the center of the Kepler Medical Complex, the largest hospital facility in this part of the galaxy. Around her, human medical staff were carefully packing equipment and supplies. "Dr. Bennett, you cannot take the regeneration chambers," said Dr. Korvash, the Hesperian who served as the hospital's assistant director. His insect-like features showed distress. "We have patients who will die without them." Lisa looked at the alien doctor she had worked with for 2 years. Korvash was a good physician and genuinely cared about his patients. This conversation was hard for her. "The regeneration chambers were built by human companies using human technology," she said gently. "We are not taking them away from patients. We are taking them back to where they belong." "But the patients, .. Korvash began, "will be transferred." "2 other facilities," Lisa finished. "There are Zilani medical centers that can handle most cases. The seriously injured can be moved to the Korthok Hospital on Proxima Station." What she did not say was that those facilities were much less advanced. Zilani medical technology was good for basic injuries, but could not handle the complex cases that came from the war zones. The Korthok Hospital was excellent, but could only treat a few dozen patients at a time. The regeneration chambers at Kepler could heal injuries that would be fatal anywhere else. It could regrow lost limbs, repair damaged organs, and cure diseases that had no other treatment. Technology was decades ahead of anything else in the galaxy. "Dr. Bennett," said Nurse Kevin Price as he approached them, "we have finished downloading the medical databases. All human research has been transferred to our ships." Lisa nodded. The medical databases contained decades of human research into alien biology. Human doctors had learned how to treat every council species, often better than their own physicians could. That knowledge was leaving with them. "What about the shared research projects?" Korvash asked desperately. "We have been working together on the void toxin antidote for 18 months. We are so close to a breakthrough." Lisa felt a stab of guilt. The void toxin was one of the deadliest weapons the enemy used, killed slowly and painfully, and there was no known cure. The joint research project had been her idea. "I am sorry, Korvash," she said, "but the human portion of that research belongs to us. You are welcome to continue your own work." She did not mention that the human portion represented about 80% of the total progress. Without human quantum computers and advanced modeling systems, the remaining researchers would be starting almost from scratch. Meanwhile, in the station's command center, things were getting tense. Commander Vexani sat in her chair at the center of the room, her ancient features showing confusion and growing alarm. She was over 4,000 years old and had seen many changes in the galaxy, but nothing like this. "Report," she ordered. "Human personnel are leaving," all departments said. Her aide, a young Zilani named Treshka. "Engineering, medical, communications, security, research, logistics, they are taking all their equipment with them." "How much of our equipment is human-made?" Vexani asked, though she feared the answer. Treshka consulted his datapad. "Approximately 73% of all major systems, Commander. The quantum computers that run life support, the fusion reactors that provide power, the communication arrays that connect us to the Council network, the transportation systems that move people and cargo." Vexani felt something she had not experienced in centuries: fear. "What about replacements? Can we get non-human systems to replace what they are taking?" "I have been checking, Commander. Most of the replacement systems are either much less efficient or do not exist at all. For example, the cargo handling systems they are removing can process 1,000 ships per day. The best Korthak system can handle maybe 50. On the other side of the station, Lieutenant Colonel Ben Harris was dealing with his own problems. He commanded the human security forces that kept order on Kepler Station. His people were responsible for protecting 3 million beings from pirates, terrorists, and the occasional void spawn infiltrator. "Colonel, the Zilani security chief wants to know about the weapon systems," said Sergeant Amy Rodriguez. "She is asking why we are removing the quantum shields and the plasma cannons." Inside, "Tell her the same thing we have been telling everyone else. The equipment belongs to Earth, and we are taking it for maintenance." "Sir, she is not buying it. Neither are the others. Word is spreading that humans are pulling out completely." Ben looked around the security office. His people were packing the last of their gear. Advanced computers, communication systems, and weapons that made their job possible were all being loaded onto transports. "How long until we are done here?" he asked. 6 hours, sir. Maybe less. How long until the station realizes they cannot defend themselves without us?" Amy checked her pad. "About 6 hours and 1 minute, sir." Ben almost smiled. His people had trained the alien security forces as best they could, but there was only so much you could do. The other species were brave enough, but they did not have the flexibility and creativity that made human security forces so effective. Without human quantum shields, the station would be vulnerable to attack. Without human weapons, they would not be able to fight off even a small raiding party. Without human coordination systems, different alien security forces would not be able to work together effectively. Captain Jake Murphy was walking through the main corridor when his communication device beeped. It was a message from Commander Vexani requesting an immediate meeting. The tone was much more urgent than it had been an hour ago. He changed direction and headed for the command center. Along the way, he passed groups of aliens watching the human evacuation with growing worry. Some tried to stop human workers to ask questions, but the humans just smiled politely and continued with their jobs. When Jake reached the command center, he found Commander Vexani pacing back and forth. Her ancient composure was cracking. "Captain Murphy," she said as soon as she saw him. "We need to talk." "Of course, Commander. What can I do for you?" "Can't explain what is happening to my station," she said. "My staff tells me that humans are removing equipment from every major system, equipment that is essential for our operation." Jake nodded. "That is correct. We are conducting a planned withdrawal of human personnel and resources." "Withdrawal?" Vexani stared at him. "For how long?" "Indefinitely," Jake replied calmly. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Vexani sat down heavily in her chair. "You cannot be serious," she said. "This station serves 3 million people. The shipping routes that pass through here supply dozens of star systems. Without human technology, we cannot function." "I understand your concerns," Jake said, "but these are our orders. All human assets in council space are being withdrawn immediately." "How? Orders from whom?" "From Earth. The decision was made after yesterday's council vote." Vexani suddenly understood. The vote that had rejected human requests for equal representation. Admiral Corthan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Wisdom, and watched the tactical display with growing unease. The massive screen showed the Varian system, where intelligence reports indicated a major void spawn force was gathering. It would be the first major battle since the humans had withdrawn from Council space 2 weeks ago. The Admiral was old, even by Korthok standards. He had lived for over 6,000 years and commanded fleets before most species had discovered fire. His experience was legendary, his tactical knowledge unmatched. The Council had chosen him to lead this operation because they needed their best commander to prove that they could win without human help. "Admiral, all ships report ready," said his aide, Commander Thelvin. The younger Korthok looked nervous. Though he tried to hide it, Korthan nodded. Around his flagship, 300 Council ships hung in space. Zilani battle cruisers with their sleek silver hulls. Spirian swarm fighters that moved like deadly insects. Korthok dreadnoughts that had been ancient when the galaxy was young. It was an impressive sight, but something was wrong. Korthan could feel it. "Where are the early warning scouts?" he asked. "Sir, we have deployed our standard reconnaissance units as planned," Thelvin replied. "Not those," Korthan said impatiently. "The human stealth ships? Where are they?" There was an uncomfortable silence on the bridge. Finally, Thelvin spoke. "Admiral, there are no human ships in the fleet. They have all been withdrawn." Korthan felt a chill run through his ancient bones. For 3 years, human stealth ships had provided early warning for every major operation. They could detect void spawn movements days before anyone else. Their quantum sensors could see through the dimensional distortions that hid enemy forces without them. The Council fleet was flying blind. "What about the medical ships?" Korthan asked. "Surely they left some behind." "No, sir. All human medical. Vessels have been recalled. We have Zilani hospital ships and Hesperian field medics." Korthan closed his eyes. Human medical ships could treat injuries that would kill soldiers from any other species. Their regeneration technology could rebuild a warrior's body even after massive trauma. Korthan had seen Zilani soldiers walk away from battles that should have left them crippled for life. The Zilani and Hesperian medical teams were competent, but they were working with technology that was decades behind human standards. Who would have survived with human care would die with the older treatments. Admiral called the sensor operator. "We are detecting dimensional distortions in the outer system. The enemy is here." Tactical display changed, showing red markers appearing at the edge of the Varian system. Korthan counted them automatically. 50 enemy ships, maybe 60. Not a huge force, but void spawn ships were dangerous in ways that normal vessels were not. "All ships prepare for battle," Korthan ordered. "Form attack formation Beta 7. The Council fleet began to move. 300 ships arranging themselves in the ancient battle formation that had served the Korthok for millennia. It was a proven strategy, one that had won countless victories over the ages, but it had never faced the void spawn without human support. The enemy ships moved closer, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light itself. They did not follow normal physics. They could phase in and out of regular space, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. They could fire weapons that ignored shields and armor, attacking the very atoms that made up a ship's hull. "Enemy vessels are beginning their attack run," reported the sensor operator. "All ships open fire," Korthan commanded. The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and fusion torpedoes streaked through the void. The Council forces had overwhelming firepower, and for a moment, it seemed like they would crush the smaller enemy force. Then the void spawn began to adapt. The enemy ships flickered out of normal space just as the weapons reached them. The massive barrage passed harmlessly through empty space. When the void spawn reappeared, they were in different positions. Closer to the Council fleet and ready to return fire. Dark energy beams lashed out from the enemy ships where they struck. Council vessels simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, but gone as if they had never been there at all. Entire crews vanished in an instant, leaving no trace behind. "Shields are ineffective," reported the tactical officer. "The enemy weapons are bypassing our defenses completely." Korthan felt panic rising in his chest. This was not how battles were supposed to go. The enemy was supposed to follow predictable patterns. They were supposed to be outgunned by superior numbers and ancient wisdom. "Where are the quantum shields?" he demanded. "Deploy the quantum barriers, sir. We do not have quantum shield technology." That was a human innovation. "Our ships are equipped with standard deflector shields." The admiral stared at the tactical display as more red markers appeared. The Void Spawn were calling in reinforcements, and the Council fleet was taking heavy losses. Ships that had survived thousands of battles were being wiped out by weapons they could not defend against. The other side of the battlefield, Commander Zaranel of the Zilani cruiser Silverblade was fighting for her life. Her ship had been hit by 3 different void weapons, and systems were failing throughout the vessel. "Engineering, I need more power to the weapons," she ordered. "Commander, the quantum fusion reactor is offline," came the reply. "We are running on backup power only," Zaronal cursed in her native language. The quantum fusion reactor was a human design, far more efficient than traditional Zilani power systems. Her ship had been retrofitted with human technology 3 years ago, but the human engineers who understood it were gone. "Can we fix it?" she asked. "You're trying, Commander, but the repair manuals are in human technical language. Our engineers do not understand the quantum mechanics involved." Another void weapon struck the Silver Blade, and Zaranel felt the ship shudder around her. Emergency lights flickered on as main power failed completely. "Medical bay report," she called. "Commander, we have 37 wounded," came the response. "But we have a problem. Serious injuries require human medical technology to treat. Our field medics cannot handle the void toxin cases." Zaranel looked at her tactical display. 5 of her crew members were dying from void toxin exposure, a weapon that attacked the nervous system and caused slow, agonizing death. For 3 years, human doctors had been able to cure it easily. Now, her people would die because the cure had walked away with the humans. She remembered the council session 2 weeks ago. She had voted to reduce human territory, believing that the proud Zilani deserved more space than the young human species. She had dismissed human complaints about equal representation, thinking them greedy and ungrateful. Now, as her ship drifted powerless through space and her crew died around her, those votes felt like poison in her memory. "Ships, this is Admiral Corthan," came the voice over the communication system. "We are withdrawing from the battle zone. Repeat, all ships withdraw immediately." Zaranel looked at her tactical display. The Council fleet was in full retreat. Of the 300 ships that had entered the battle, less than 200 were still functional. The Void Spawn had won a complete victory, back on his flagship. Admiral Corthan stared at the after-action reports with disbelief. 73 ships destroyed, 42 ships disabled, and over 50,000 casualties. It was the worst defeat in Council military history. "How?" he asked aloud. "How did they adapt so quickly to our tactics?" Commander Thelvin looked up from his datapad. "Sir, I have been reviewing the tactical recordings. It appears that the enemy was using adaptive algorithms to counter our battle formations. These algorithms analyze our movement patterns and predict our next actions." "That is impossible," Corthan said. "Our battle formations have been secret for thousands of years." "Sir, I believe the humans may have shared tactical data with the Council computer networks to help coordinate joint operations. When they withdrew, they took that data with them, but the enemy may have already adapted to our patterns." Corthan felt the weight of his failures pressing down on him. The humans had not just provided ships and technology, they had provided the intelligence and analysis that made modern warfare possible. Their computers had studied enemy tactics and developed countermeasures. Their strategic planning had kept the Council forces one step ahead of Void Spawn adaptation. Without that support, the ancient tactics that had served for millennia were useless against an enemy that learned and evolved with every battle. "Sir, we are receiving emergency communications from across the sector," reported the communications officer. "Void Spawn forces are attacking multiple systems simultaneously. They seem to know that our defenses are weakened." Corthan closed his eyes. The enemy was not just adapting to individual battles, they were adapting to the entire strategic situation. Without human intelligence networks, the Council had no idea how many enemy forces were out there or where they would strike next. "Send a message to the Council," he ordered quietly. Tell them that we need to reconsider our relationship with humanity. Tell them that we cannot win this war alone. But even as he gave the order, Korthon knew it was probably too late. The humans had offered partnership and been rejected. Dr. Yevazan stared at the datapad in his forehands and felt his stomach turn. The Hesperian scientist had been tracking the plague for 6 weeks now, and the numbers kept getting worse. What had started as a small outbreak on the mining world of Kefter was now spreading across 17 different star systems. The disease was called Red Death, and it had been completely eliminated from the galaxy 15 years ago. Human medical researchers had developed a cure that was 99% effective. Every major world had stocks of the medicine in their emergency supplies, but the medicine required human quantum computers to manufacture. The production process involved manipulating molecules at the atomic level, something that only human technology could do reliably. When the humans left, they took their computers with them. Dr. Yevazan, we have the latest reports from Proxima Colony, said his assistant, Dr. Hanara. Her voice was shaking. 3,000 new cases in the last day.
Oh.
The medical centers are completely overwhelmed. Yevazan closed his eyes. Proxima Colony had a population of 2 million Hesperians. If the disease continued to spread at this rate, the entire world would be infected within a month. What about the Zilani medical ships? He asked. Can they help? They're trying, but their equipment cannot produce the medicine we need. They can treat the symptoms and make patients more comfortable, but they cannot cure the disease. Yevazan thought about the human medical facility that had been on Proxima Colony until 3 weeks ago. Dr. Rebecca. Torres had run that facility with her team of 20 human doctors. They could have stopped this outbreak before it spread beyond. The first few cases, but Dr. Torres and her team were gone now, withdrawn along with all other human personnel. The facility had been turned over to local doctors who did not understand how the advanced equipment worked. Across the galaxy, similar disasters were unfolding. On Zilani Prime, the capital world of the Zilani Republic, the transportation system had collapsed completely. For 20 years, human logistics algorithms had coordinated the movement of 50 million people every day. The algorithms optimized traffic flow, scheduled public transport, and managed the supply chains that kept the massive city functioning. When the humans left, they took their computers with them. The Zilani tried to use their own transportation management systems, but they could only handle a tiny fraction of the traffic. The great highways became parking lots. Supply ships sat in orbit for weeks waiting for landing clearance. Food shortages began appearing in districts that had never known hunger. Governor Veltar of Zilani Prime sat in his office and listened to reports of increasing civil unrest. His people were angry and frightened. They had been told that the humans were just junior partners in the Galactic Alliance. They had been assured that Zilani technology could handle anything. Now they were learning the truth. Governor, the situation is getting worse, reported his aide, Captain Morthen. We have riots in the eastern districts. People cannot get to work because the transport system is not functioning. The food distribution centers are running out of supplies. What about using our military transport network? Veltar asked. Sir, our military systems were designed to move armies, not civilian populations. We can transport maybe 10,000 people per day instead of the 50 million we need. Veltar rubbed his forehead with his primary hands. The Zilani had been proud of their independence, their ancient warrior culture. They had voted to take human territory because they believed they deserved more space than the younger species, now that pride was strangling his world. Meanwhile, on the ancient world of Korth Magna, the oldest planet in Council space, a different kind of disaster was unfolding. The planetary computer network that had functioned for 3,000 years was finally breaking down. The Korthok had built their computers using technology that was ancient but reliable. The massive machines filled underground caverns and had calculated everything from orbital mechanics to tax collection for millennia. But 20 years ago, human technicians had begun upgrading the systems with quantum processors that made the old computers 1,000 times more powerful. Now those quantum processors were gone. The ancient machines could not handle the computational load of a modern galactic civilization. Archivist. Calthrin stood in the main computer chamber and watched centuries of knowledge disappear. The old systems were overloading, trying to process data streams that required quantum calculations. Files were becoming corrupted. Historical records that had survived since the dawn of galactic civilization were turning into meaningless noise.
8.
We have lost another data archive, reported Technician Belver. The financial records for the Eastern Spiral Arm are gone. It's completely unreadable. Colthrin felt a pain in his chest that had nothing to do with his advanced age. Those records represented the economic history of billions of people across thousands of worlds. They contained trade agreements, property records, and financial transactions that went back centuries. What about backups? He asked desperately. Sir, the backup systems were upgraded with human technology 5 years ago. The quantum storage drives are incompatible with our older systems. We cannot access them without human technical support. The Korthak had been so proud of their ancient wisdom, their deep knowledge of galactic history. They had dismissed human suggestions about updating their computer systems, believing that their traditional methods were superior. They had voted against human representation because they thought the young species had nothing to teach them. Now, their entire civilization was collapsing into digital. Chaos in the Outer Rim territories, things were even worse. The trade routes that connected hundreds of worlds had been optimized by human shipping algorithms for over a decade. These programs calculated the most efficient paths between star systems, taking into account gravitational fields, solar radiation, and political boundaries. Without the algorithms, cargo ships were taking routes that were 50% longer and twice as dangerous. Some ships got lost completely, their crews unable to navigate the complex web of hyperspace lanes without computer assistance. Captain Daruk of the Hesperian merchant vessel Swift Prophet had been trying to reach the Andromeda station for 3 weeks. The journey used to take for days with human navigation systems. Now he was lost in a nebula that his instruments could not properly scan. Captain, we are down to emergency rations, reported his first officer, engineer. Technol. Getting worried? Daruk stared at the star charts that made no sense without the human computers that had interpreted them. His ship was designed to follow automated trade routes, not to navigate unknown space. Send another distress signal, he ordered. Maybe someone will hear us. But Daruk knew that even if someone heard the signal, they might not be able to help. The search and rescue services had also depended on human technology to locate ships in distress. Without quantum sensors and adaptive algorithms, finding a lost ship in the vastness of space was nearly impossible. On Earth, President Alex Rodriguez sat in his office and read the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Intelligence services were still monitoring Council space, but they were careful not to interfere. The reports painted a picture of civilization in collapse. Diseases spreading unchecked, transportation systems failing, computer networks crashing, trade routes abandoned, millions of people suffering because the Council had decided that humans were not worthy of equal treatment. Mr. President, we have received another communication from the Council, said Secretary of State Patricia Morgan. They are requesting immediate assistance with the medical crisis on 17 worlds. Rodriguez looked at the message on his screen. It was polite and formal, carefully worded to avoid admitting that the Council had made a mistake. It asked for temporary medical support and offered to pay appropriate compensation for human aid. What is our response? Patricia asked. Rodriguez thought about the Council session 6 weeks ago. He thought about Ambassador Carter's quiet dignity as she was told that humanity would never be treated as an equal partner. He thought about the territories that had been taken away from human colonists to give to species that saw humans as useful servants. Send our regrets, he said finally. Tell them that our medical resources are fully committed to protecting human worlds. We cannot spare any personnel for external operations. It was a polite way of saying no. The humans would not come running to save people who had treated them like disposable tools. Sir, what about the civilian casualties? Patricia asked. The reports indicate that millions of people are suffering. Rodriguez felt the weight of those lives on his shoulders. But he also remembered the votes in the Council chamber. 847 votes against human equality, Not a single alien species had stood with humanity when it mattered. The council made their choice, he said quietly. They decided they could do without human partnership, and they can learn what that actually means. Across the galaxy, that lesson was becoming clearer every day. Proud Zilani were discovering that their warrior culture could not manage a complex civilian economy. The ancient Korthok were learning that wisdom without technology was powerless against modern problems. The numerous Hesperians were finding that quantity could not replace quality in critical systems. Council leader Vexthera stood in the ruins of what had once been the greatest governing chamber in the galaxy. The crystalline walls were cracked and dim, their light failing as the power system struggled to function. The seats in the vast amphitheater were empty now. Many worlds had simply stopped sending representatives when their governments collapsed. 18 months had passed since the humans walked away. 18 months of disasters, failures, and slowly spreading chaos. The Galactic Council, which had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000,000 years, was dying. Report, Vexthera said to the few delegates who remained. Ambassador Nelkar of the Zilani Republic spoke first. His forearms shook as he consulted his datapad. Council leader, we have lost contact with 37 Zilani worlds. The transportation networks have completely failed in the core systems. Our government estimates that over 2 billion of our people have died from starvation, disease, or civil war. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. 2 billion lives lost because the Zilani had been too proud to treat humans as equals. The Korthok Dominion reports similar losses, said Elder Morthal, her ancient voice barely a whisper. Our computer networks have failed completely. We have lost all records of planetary populations, trade agreements, and resource allocations. Our civilization is reverting to pre-industrial levels of organization. Vexthera felt her crystalline form growing dimmer with despair. The Korthok had been the keepers of galactic knowledge for millions of years. If they were losing their records, then the accumulated wisdom of countless civilizations was disappearing forever. What of the Hesperians? She asked. The Hesperian collective has fragmented into 17 separate factions, reported Administrator Tekvel. Without the medical technology to control the Red Death Plague, entire worlds have been quarantined. Our species faces possible extinction within a generation. The chamber fell silent. These were the same beings who had voted overwhelmingly to reject human partnership just 18 months ago. They had been so confident in their superiority, so certain that they could manage without the young upstart species. Now they were begging for salvation. Council leader, said Nelkar quietly, we have received reports that the Void Spawn have resumed their offensive. Without our early warning systems, they have consumed 6 more star systems in the past month. Our defensive lines are collapsing. Vexthera closed her eyes. The Void Spawn had been patient, waiting for the Council's weakness to become apparent. Now they were pressing their advantage, sweeping through space that had been secure for decades. How many ships do we have left? She asked. Across all remaining Council worlds, perhaps 300 operational vessels, replied Admiral Decaron of the surviving Korthok fleet. Most lack the quantum shielding necessary to fight Void Spawn effectively. We estimate we can hold them for perhaps 6 months at most. 6 months. The greatest military alliance in galactic history had been reduced to 6 months of desperate resistance. We have one option remaining, Vexthera said slowly. We must contact the humans. The suggestion sent murmurs through the chamber. Some delegates looked hopeful. Others appeared ashamed. Few seemed angry that they had been reduced to such desperation. What makes you think they will help us? Asked Elder Morthal. We rejected their partnership, took their territory. We treated them like servants rather than equals, because that is what humans do, Vexthera replied. They help others even when those others do not deserve it. It is their nature. She was right, though she did not fully understand why. Humans had spent their entire history helping others, even their enemies. They had rebuilt worlds they had conquered, fed populations that had fought against them, and shared their knowledge. With species that despised them, the Council had mistaken this generosity for weakness. They had assumed that because humans were willing to help, it could be taken advantage of, without consequence. Ambassador Helen Carter received the Council's message while sitting in her office, overlooking the gardens of New Geneva. Through her window, she could see human children playing in parks that were clean and safe. The human worlds had prospered during their isolation, free from the burden of supporting an ungrateful galaxy. The message was formal and carefully worded, but the desperation bled through every line. The Council was requesting immediate assistance with medical emergencies, infrastructure collapse, and military defense. They offered complete territorial concessions, unlimited trade rights, and full political partnership. Helen read the message 3 times, then forwarded it to President Rodriguez with her recommendation. An hour later, she received her instructions. The next day, Helen stood once again in the council chamber. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives from every major human world and corporation. They had come not as supplicants, requesting recognition, but as the only hope for galactic survival. The chamber was barely half full. Many species had simply ceased to exist as organized civilizations. Others were too busy fighting for survival to send delegates. Those who remained looked at the human delegation with a mixture of hope and shame. Council leader Vexera, Helen said, her voice clear and strong, "We have received your request for assistance." Ambassador Carter Vexera replied, her crystalline form flickering weakly. "We are grateful that you have come. The situation across council space is dire. We need human help desperately." "Yes," Helen agreed, "you do." The simple statement carried the weight of 18 months of suffering. No one in the chamber could argue with it. However, Helen continued, "Before we discuss assistance, we need to establish some basic facts. Human species offered partnership. To this council, we were rejected. We offered our knowledge and technology freely. We were told we were too young and inexperienced to understand galactic affairs." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And we requested equal representation. We were denied. When we asked for respect, we were ignored. When we needed support, you voted to take our territory away." Yet several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They remembered those votes, and they remembered how confident they had felt at the time. "So before we continue," Helen said, "I need to understand something. Are you requesting our help as equals, or are you expecting us to serve as your rescue service?" The question cut to the heart of everything that had gone wrong. Too long, the council had seen humans as useful tools rather than partners. They had expected human generosity without offering respect in return. Vexthera was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "We are requesting your help as equals," she said. "We recognize that we made a terrible mistake. We were blinded by pride and prejudice. We failed to see that humanity had become the foundation upon which our civilization rested." "And if we help you," Helen asked, "what assurance do we have that you will not make the same mistake again? What guarantee do we have that you will treat us as true partners rather than convenient servants?" This time, Elder Morthel answered. The ancient Korthok struggled to her feet, her voice carrying the weight of millions of years of history. "You have no guarantees," she said honestly. "We've proven ourselves unworthy of trust. We allowed our arrogance to destroy the greatest alliance in galactic history. The only thing we can offer is our word, and we know that our word has little value after our actions." The honesty was painful, but necessary. There could be no partnership built on lies or false promises. Helen looked around the chamber at the remnants of the once mighty council. These beings had ruled the galaxy when humans were still learning to make fire. They had commanded fleets of 1 million ships and governed trillions of citizens across countless worlds. Now they sat in a failing chamber, their civilizations crumbling, begging for help from the species they had dismissed as children. "President Rodriguez has authorized me to offer limited humanitarian assistance," Helen said finally. "Medical aid for the plague worlds, food supplies for the starving populations, search and rescue for lost ships." Hope flickered in alien eyes. Across the chamber, however, Helen continued, "This assistance comes with conditions. First, the territories taken from human colonists will be returned immediately. Second, humanity will have equal representation in any future council. Third, human personnel providing aid will have complete authority in their areas of responsibility. No interference, no second-guessing, no political meddling. The conditions were harsh but fair. The council had proven they could not manage without human help. If they wanted that help, they would have to accept human leadership. And finally, Helen said this assistance is temporary. We will help you stabilize your civilizations and establish basic services, but we will not carry you forever. You must learn to stand on your own, or you will fall again. It was a hard truth, but a necessary one. Dependency had led to the current crisis. Only self-reliance could prevent it from happening again. The vote was unanimous. Every remaining delegate voted to accept the human conditions. They had no choice. As Helen Carter walked out of the chamber for the second time, she reflected on how much had changed. 18 months ago, she had left in defeat, carrying the rejection of an arrogant council. Today, she left as the representative of the galaxy's only hope for survival.